they just had some really difficult behaviors. And I kind of sat there and asked myself, like, why are these kids doing this? Like, what is the purpose? And I found that they couldn't tell you something was wrong, something was upsetting them, but they couldn't tell you why. And that's what really pushed me to be an SLP, because I wanted to be able to be the person that gave that child a voice and allowed them to tell someone what they needed.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Therapy Unmasked today. Today we're joined by a speech therapist, a pediatric speech therapist here at Ability Innovations. Her name is Abby Moran, and then we also have Nick with us too. So,
hi, everybody.
And my name's Tyler. You probably haven't seen me before, but I'm the new marketing director here at Ability Innovations. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thanks for being part of this, Tyler.
Yeah, of course.
We've got Abby here. Abby, tell us a little bit about what speech therapy, what a speech-language pathologist is, and kind of what you do here.
Our field is extremely broad, so we can work on anything from early language skills to articulation, which is essentially speech sound production. Our range of what we can do is really broad, as well as the age range that we can work with too. So
birth to death.
Wow. Yes, exactly. So yes. Yeah, here I really only see kids I did see a 1-year-old yesterday, but pretty much 1 to like 18-ish. So
just in their speaking years and stuff as pediatrics, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
I think also with speech therapy too, it's interesting too, because there's so many different issues that kids can have, right? Like from being nonverbal to just not being able to say like a few words. Have you noticed that a lot since you've been here? Like the different kinds, and like how do you go about crafting a certain plan for a kid?
Yeah. I mean, starting with the evaluation really tells us a lot. But interviewing parents is really important too. You know, parents know their kids best. And so it's really important that we get their input and kind of hear what they have to say and their concerns. And from there, we are super play-based. So I think it's really important to evaluate their play skills as well and kind of learn what they like to do and what they don't like to do. And kind of incorporate that into whatever we're addressing. So with articulation, that could mean finding target words while we're playing and really working on those words. Language therapy, we can kind of do language therapy wherever because it's really child-led and it's really important that they are enjoying what they're doing because that's how they're going to learn
they learn language,
yes.
Just in their normal everyday stuff, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, tell us a little bit too about like if a parent wants to just even encourage their kid to talk more because they're just learning or they just don't understand their kid, what kinds of things could they do at home?
There's a whole lot of things you could do. For early language, we like to use something called a verbal routine where kids kind of have to fill in the blank. So it might be something like ready, set, go. And the kid kind of has to fill in that blank to get.
And you use that pause.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To elicit the language.
Yes. And that pause I always tell parents it can sometimes feel a little awkward. Like sometimes it feels like you're waiting.
None of us like silence.
Yes. Yeah. But I've waited for what seems like forever. And sometimes kids will surprise you and still say go, and we can do it with songs too. Like, yeah.
Yeah. One thing, that's really cool about Ability Innovations, we touched on it a little bit, is that we are a play-based pediatric therapy. When it comes to speech, like obviously you can like pull out little show cards and show different words and, you know, talk about the different sounds they're going to be discussing during the day. But how do you make it fun? How do you make it a play-based environment for these kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like we just mentioned, I mean, the importance of it being important to them is essential because if they don't care about the target word, then it's not going to carry over. So we'll target words like if a kiddo is working on TH, I'd rather work on the word thank you, because that's super functional. You can use it across settings. I feel like parents are always telling their kids, say thank you, that sort of thing, rather than, like a speech card that's like with the target word thimble on it. Because when is a kid ever going to say the word thimble?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think it's just really about finding those opportunities during play. Or I was working with a kiddo the other day, and we were working on our F sound, and she wasn't really in the mood to do any sort of structured sort of tasks. So we're doing a puzzle, and we were just practicing found it with that F sound. So finding those natural ways to target speech in a fun way where it's not necessarily sitting there and, drilling words. It's kind of practicing speech, but kind of in disguise.
Well, do you find in your profession, like a lot of therapists have a hard time with practicing words or language in a way that's more play-based?
It can be really challenging, but I think because the easiest thing to do would just be to sit down with a kiddo and whip out a deck of cards and
have them say them over and over.
Yeah, exactly. That would be easiest, but the carryover is going to not be as great and it's not as functional. So I think it can be really challenging to find those natural words while you're playing. But I think it kind of comes with practice. And, as speech therapists, we're often pretty creative and flexible. So I think having those two skills is really important.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. One thing that I think is really interesting also is these kids are going to school too, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the schools will send these kids into programs during school to help them with their speech. I think of my nephew. He's like, I would say about 6. I think he's 6. He's going to kindergarten. And they already know he's probably going to need to see like a speech therapist. He has trouble saying his L sounds and like Y sounds and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering, like, from the perspective of a parent, how do you know, like, if the school isn't enough and you need outside help?
That is a great question. I personally have never worked in the schools, partially because I feel like I can't serve kids the best there. I feel like in private practice, we're more able to be a really collaborative team with parents and give them the tools that they need to work on the skills that the kiddo's working on in other environments, like at home, at daycare with their friends.
That may or may not happen in the schools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of speech paths in the schools, and I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic because everything in the school has to be educationally relevant.
Absolutely.
And so what they're doing is great, but it's all educationally relevant. So they might not be talking about those things that happen at home or in community or things like that. They might, but I would think that they fall under that same model of educationally relevant language.
Absolutely. Where you're exactly right. I think in private practice, we can focus more on the functional aspect of things and how, because kids are in school a lot, but it's not their whole lives. So for them to be able to communicate outside of school is also equally as important.
Mm-hmm. I think Nick has like a really unique perspective on this because that's kind of how you started Ability Innovations, right? You were working in the school district.
Yeah, I had worked in the school district for just about a decade. And that's one of the reasons why we started all of this, is because we wanted to do something more. And I like that you're talking about like the collaboration with families and being able to even like here at the clinic, they can watch what you're doing. They can be right there next to you guys and watching or even participating in the activities, right?
Yeah, that's one of the other things that drew me to private practice is how involved parents can be, because like you said, they can participate in the session. I also like to take a few minutes at the end of every session and spend it educating parents on how they can facilitate communication at home and provide them with strategies that will either elicit language or on how they can work on their speech sounds at home in a way that's not that their kiddo enjoys it or isn't frustrating for them.
And you're doing that every session.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which I know, because I've talked to a lot of speech paths too, is that's one of the things in the schools, like they maybe have an IEP meeting once a year
Yep.
with families.
Yeah.
And you're getting that interaction with parents every session.
Absolutely.
That's so cool.
Absolutely. And it's super important. I mean, speech is like kind of learning how to play the piano, right? Like it's great that they come here for 30 minutes or 60 minutes every week because that's where the base of their foundation is coming from. If they don't practice at home and parents don't know how to practice it at home, progress is going to be a lot slower. So I think it's so important that parents are included in what we're doing.
I love that analogy, actually. That makes a lot of sense because speech is also just so important to your development when you're growing up. Like if you pick up bad speech habits as a kid, and I know I have a
They
lot
almost never go away.
They never really go away. But yeah, that is so cool. Like just honestly, like the parental support. I was reading, we have an articles page on our website, and there was a recent article that one of our therapists wrote. I can't remember their name, but it was about Hodson's theory and how we practice that with play. But then at the very end, it said to make sure you're celebrating the success of the child and to make sure you're supporting them at home. I just think that's so perfect because we can do all these activities, we can prepare for it all, but if we're not celebrating their success and if we're not supporting them at home.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that article was by Najude, and she did a really good job with that.
You can totally find that on the website. I would even say it kind of falls under the 80-20 rule. Like we're able, I think even in the schools, we're able to do about 20% on a good day, and 80% of the rest of the time is all at home.
Absolutely.
They largely learn how to speak and how to communicate with their families, with their parents.
Absolutely.
And so what a key thing that we're able to focus on here. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other questions, Abby, that we like to ask people is when you're working with kids, you're often finding we're superhero themed here. So you're often finding some superpowers that you didn't know you had. Can you tell us about some of the things that you've learned and that have become your superpower?
I mean, I brought this up earlier, but being creative and being flexible are definitely my superpowers. Like I said, it takes kind of a special skill to find those naturally occurring opportunities during play, which is why it can be really tricky to use such a play-based approach. Why it's easier to just pull out a deck of cards and drill that way. So I think being creative and finding those opportunities is definitely one of my superpowers. And then being flexible too. Because we can go in with a plan and sometimes that plan doesn't work out and that's okay. And I think that's a skill that's important for us to teach our kids too, to be flexible with our thinking and kind of our plans too.
I actually worked with a speech path this morning and I watched her do that as well. It was interesting because she had a little icon of a globe, but we knew that the kid didn't know that word.
Sure.
And so when he was saying things like Earth, and that's where we live, like he was still communicating and using the language that he knew.
Yeah.
And she was just trying to shape that.
Absolutely.
And get him talking more about what a globe does. And yes, it is a picture of the Earth, and it's 3D picture of the Earth. You can see all the way around it. And she was going through all of these things with him, and I was like, this is amazing. Like it's not just about what's on a card, right, or what's on a little icon.
Right. There's so much more to it, which again, like our play-based approach is so awesome because we can use real items, real world things that naturally occur in our environment.
Like going off of that, do you have any experiences like that since you've been working here where you've been able to like kind of teach in that way where you use those real world experiences in the environment around us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that a lot of kids have a hard time with are spatial concepts. So that's concepts of in, on, behind, in front of, all those things. And I absolutely love targeting that goal with kids because it occurs so frequently while we're playing. I was playing with a kiddo the other day, and I say playing, I mean working. Yes.
Our work is play.
Yes, yes, it's the best job. and we were playing with Legos, and we were, working on, the little Lego guy is going down the slide, and we're building a house, so we need to put this Lego next to this one, and this one on top of this one, and now the little Lego guy is going through the door. Those sorts of things where it's super functional.
That is just so cool that you guys can do that, pull that stuff. I was in Ogden the other day because we were doing our water week up there. So I was filming some content for that. And I took some time to go around and follow one of the speech therapists, and they had a little kiddo with them. And it was interesting because they would grab an object and the kid wouldn't know what the object was. And so the speech therapist would be like, oh, that's a ball. Can you say ball? And then they would say, sound it out and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's so interesting because the kid is playing with a ball. Now they know what it is and how to say it. And now it's like burned into their mind that each time they go play with it again, they know that that's the ball.
Absolutely.
So I just feel like going back to our previous question about the schools, they don't really do that there. No, they
don't.
They just kind of pull out a card with maybe a picture of a ball, and they're like, "What's this?" That's not fun. That doesn't really stimulate their learning.
And I think, to be fair, SLPs in the school, they don't have as much time to make it as functional as we do here. So I think we're really lucky that we have the opportunity to be able to, have the facility to play with kids in a way that we're focusing on function.
I know a lot of kids are like movers and shakers. And I watched you this morning playing with a kid that would get up on the mat table and then crash down over and over. And it looked like so much fun. And I thought that to me, because I'm an occupational therapist, so that to me was like, that kid is having a blast and he's learning so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know who you're talking about. We targeted all sorts of things this morning, from vocabulary. We were stacking blocks, and we're working on spatial concepts, on top colors, 2-word phrases, all sorts of things. So
it's interesting because if you just walk by and you don't know, they're like, well, the kid's just bouncing around. It doesn't look like she's doing much with him. But there are so many things that you're targeting.
We have the best job because essentially get to play with kids all day, but in a very
that little guy, he didn't know any different. He was just like, this is so fun. I get to like crash around and knock over blocks and do all that, and at the same time he's learning. And it makes me think, like, that's how children learn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do we ever restrict that by sitting them at a table? That's
Absolutely.
Not how kids learn.
No.
Right? But they learn by doing, by exploring, by using their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So cool.
Well, we'll wrap up in a little bit. I do have one more question, though, for you. I kind of want to know why did you choose to do this? Like, why did you pick this as a career path? Speech therapy in particular. What drew you into the play-based therapy? Like, why did you decide to do this?
Yeah. So my undergraduate degree is in psychology. So I had to do like an internship for one of my classes, and we were in an ABA clinic, and I kind of looked around and saw all these kids that were presenting with a lot of behaviors. There were kids that were hurting themselves and biting other people, and they just had some really difficult behaviors. And I kind of sat there and asked myself, like, why are these kids doing this? Like, what is the purpose? And I found that they couldn't tell you something was wrong, something was upsetting them, but they couldn't tell you why. And that's what really pushed me to be an SLP, because I wanted to be able to be the person that gave that child a voice and allowed them to tell someone what they needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. Communication, right? Like the child can't communicate and you want to help them do that. So it's really powerful. Yeah.
I really think it's kind of the cornerstone of human existence. Like, what are we doing right now? We're communicating, right?
Well, sweet. That's awesome. Did you have any other questions, Nick?
I had one brewing in my head, but I can't seem to pull it out. But I will ask you, like, what advice would you give a parent that is just wondering, sitting at home, maybe even listening to this podcast and going, should I take my kid in or not? Like, how do I know when this is significant?
As I said before, parents, you you know your kid best and you should trust your gut. There's a pretty significant amount of research that early intervention leads to better results, and that kids are better off if they get the services sooner than later. So I think if you are questioning it, trust your gut and have them evaluated. It doesn't hurt to have them evaluated. It's also play-based, so it'll probably be fun for the kid.
Right.
Well, and Heritability Innovations, it's like a free consult that you can come in and just even talk and ask those questions to Abby herself.
Absolutely. Yes. Come talk to me. I'd love to see you.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say that, like, we offer free consultations for these kids to, like, even if you think your kid is fine, you'd want to be sure, right? So, like, give us a call, either of our locations, schedule the free consultation, and just figure out if, like, this is something that can benefit your kid.
Right. Yeah. I think the consultation is a great stepping stone to get to decide whether you feel like you need to have your kiddo evaluated or not. And we can be there as a tool to kind of guide you in a direction if you feel like you need that support.
Well said. Thanks, Abby.
That was great, Abby. Thank you.
Yeah,
so we'll go ahead and just wrap up today. Well, thanks for checking out the podcast today, guys. We really appreciate all of your support and your viewership. If you like what you see, feel free to give this podcast a like or share it with a friend if you know that there's someone out there who could benefit from what we've talked about today. We also have lots of different podcasts and topics. If you head on over to abilityinnovations.com, you can find free articles, free resources, lots of free podcast information out there. If you have any questions or need to reach out to us for any reason about this podcast, go ahead and head over to Instagram and follow us at Therapy Unmasked. You can send us your questions there. But we want to hear from you in the comments as well. What did you think about today's episode? Is speech therapy really a big, important step for children? And will that help them later down in life? So leave that for us. Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
So leave that for us down below. But thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.